Beckenham Neighbourhood Association, Peter Tuffley. 10:55. Right. Oops. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and councillors. And on behalf of the BNA, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to address you. First of all, I'd like to say how much we applaud the council's wisdom in reverting to this more focused format of consultation after last year's well-intentioned but rather shambolic experiment.
We do our best. We do our best.
I'll be spending quite a bit of time of my time talking about one or two things that we're particularly concerned about, but I'd like to start by highlighting the fact that, overall we take a very positive view of this year's annual plan, and I'd like to mention one or two particularly positive things in our view. The first is we're very happy with the overall financial strategy that the council has adopted. In particular, seeing how the council has responded to public concerns about sale of assets. We like the way in which the burden of funding has been spread over a number of sources, and we think this is a very sensible approach. Given that council borrowing comes in for some flack from time to time, but we remain very much in favour of the council's use of the principle of intergenerational equity, to the extent that future generations will benefit from expenditure that the council is incurring now. So that's one positive thing in our view. Something else that I would like to mention, and it won't surprise anyone who recognises the fact that the Beckenham loop of the Heathcote River is a very defining feature of our neighbourhood. We welcome the planned expenditure of something of overall about $8 million on things like Upper Heathcote water storage and bank stabilisation. And we also welcome the proposed major increase in expenditure on stormwater drainage, something else that our local residents have cause to be concerned about. We'd like a bit more. We'd like to see some of the proposed expenditure on Heathcote wet weather overflow reduction brought forward, and we do see at least one opportunity for possible savings that could make room for this. But again, in this area too, there's quite a lot that we welcome. And we also take heart from the inclusion of the Mid-Heathcote Linear Park in proposed expenditure for 2018 to 19. Turning to things we're concerned about, I think at the top of our list of concerns would be the increase in resource consent management fees and deposits. In the years since the earthquakes in particular, it seems to us that Christchurch has to some extent become a bit of a gravy train for the benefit of consultants, advisors, self-promoting experts and ologists of numerous kinds, some of which are necessary but maybe not all. And the view we take of the proposed increased charges and deposits, together with the fact that they've been explicitly attributed to increased professional outsourcing, seems to us to be a particularly blatant example of the city becoming a bit more of a gravy train, and applicants for resource consent, including residents needing consent for very minor home alterations, of whom there may well be many in Beckenham because of the new character area rules, all these applicants being required to pay for the extra gravy. More private profit at public expense, less controlled over costs, and in our view, this isn't on. We think, if the council has a problem processing resource consent applications, then the way to go is to develop more in-house capacity and use outsourcing as a last resource. On cycleways, most, if not all, present will probably have noticed a letter in today's press about the proliferation of cycleways in disregard of the impact on residents of loss of on-street parking outside their houses. And we would echo that concern, but we would add a concern about the impact on small retail businesses of loss of parking outside the front of their shops. Businesses of the kind that we see as an essential part of the life of local communities. We're not anti-cyclist, but when we recall that in its early days the bicycle was known as a velocipede, we see something of a danger of cycleways policy being driven by what one could call overzealous velocipedophiles. And possibly we would suggest a reduction in expenditure on cycleway provision might be an area for possible savings to make room for the relatively slight additional expenditure we're requesting. One other thing I'd like to hark back to, and that is about 10 years ago, a bit over 10 years ago, the council undertook a review of its policy on working relationships with local residents groups. It convened a reference group of residents groups representatives from around the city, and there was a lot of discussion, and a lot of people gave up quite a lot of time for that, and then all of a sudden it was shelved. And it seems quite clear in hindsight that this was because, or probably because, the council bureaucracy didn't like the direction in which the discussion was heading. We would like to see that review revived and completed. We think that would be timely after 10 years. In conclusion, again, I'd like to say that although I've expressed some reservations on VNA's behalf, our overall view of the council of this year's draft annual plan is very positive. It's the most pleasing draft annual plan that most of us around our committee table can remember, and it would seem that when one looks back over the recent years, you and your council colleagues have made a difference. Thank you very much.
Gosh. Oh, feeling quite overwhelmed. Thank you. It's the nicest thing you've ever seen. Pauline.
Thank you for those lovely comments. It's great. Hey, just on your comments about the Residents Association's policy review, and you said where it was heading. Can you? Where was it heading?
That's a good question. Well, into the ether.
There was a proposal from the staff who were servicing this exercise that residents' associations who concern themselves with community matters and engage in dialogue with the council about community matters, and are sometimes a bit critical of the council about matters they're concerned about, should be treated as being no different from hobby groups. Cat fanciers, stamp collectors, knitting circles, sewing groups, you name it.
Cyclists.
I don't think there's anyone left to offend Peter.
And there was considerable resistance, manifest resistance to this proposal from the residents groups representatives concerned. They said, no, our function is different. we serve a community purposes, and so there was a pushback against this proposal, and surprise, surprise, the next thing we heard was that the whole exercise had been shelved.
Right, so that explains it. Thank you.
Well, it's not helpful to have a debate about it right now, but we will have a discussion about it. But thank you very much, Peter. No, it really is genuinely a pleasure to see you. You always come, and it is valuable always as a contribution to our consideration of the annual plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you for those kind words, Madam Mayor.
You just lost a brownie point for that. Cashmere Stream.